The Coffin text, possibly the roadmap to the afterlife. This is a very important set of texts that is classified as true sacred texts, in the same vein in which you would view the pyramid text, but also sacred texts from other cultures, including Abrahamic beliefs with the Bible, the Rosetta of Norse mythology. This literature comes to us from Kemetic Egyptian culture and is primarily associated with the afterlife. The term coffin text is a modern name for a very diverse body of spells or recitations used on burial equipment during very specifically the Middle Kingdom. These texts were mainly painted on wooden coffins, but also appear in tomb walls and funerary items such as canopic chests. The coffin texts were composed in Middle Egyptian, in a form of the Egyptian language that was standard for literary works that were texts and were written in what we would call very simple hieroglyphics. Few sections of the coffin text have illustrations that form integral parts of those particular spells. And the most elaborate of these is a section called the Two Maps, and it belongs to a section of the coffin text known as the Book of Two Ways. These maps were usually painted on the floor of coffins, and these are some of the earliest known maps from any culture. But most interestingly, the Book of Two Ways is nothing less than an illustrated guide to the afterlife, and it claims to give two routes, one by land and one by water, through a sinister but divine realm beyond the horizon. And it was designed to provide the deceased with spells they would need to get past these monstrous guardians that they would face on their descent into the underworld. The deceased had to pass through a very mysterious and dangerous area where the body of Osiris lay surrounded by walls of flame. And if the deceased man or woman proved to be worthy, he or she might be granted a new life in a paradise called the Field of Offerings. Now, although these are not narratives in the traditional forms that we see some mythologies, the coffin texts still describe major events in the Egyptian creation story and even provide evidence for the Egyptian views about the end of the world. The creator Atum-Ra and his offspring Shu and Tefnut are particularly prominent in these early stories, and much of the text deals with the transformation of the sun god into various forms. One new element that's particularly stressed is the danger that the sun god faces during his celestial voyage, such as his constant attacks by the chaos monster Apep snake. Coffin texts have been found all over Egypt, but primarily from the geological region known as Middle Egypt. And local deities of Middle Egypt such as Thoth, called Jehudi, and the group of primordial beings that we would call the Ogdoad of Hermopolis are featured in many of these early spells. Jehudi also appears in many of the spells that allude to the conflict between Horus and Set, and the rescue of the body of Osiris after he descends into the underworld. Like many sacred texts, the coffin texts give us an insight to how people from that area and time of the world thought, what they believed would happen to them, and their preparation. It says that they believed in an afterlife, that there was something there for them. It was challenging and one needed to prepare. But still, the idea of being able to wake up in a world that they saw as not so dissimilar from their own world. Again, the ideology of as above, so below, tying the concept of this world and the spiritual world on some type of a foundation, an equal footing, although one world would tend to be more or less of a physical world. And this is what we learned from looking at how the ancient Kemetic people prepared themselves and their royalty for their next step. Thank you again for stopping at Nile World Chronicles as we dig through the threads that connect mythologies and people and instances.